What's up? What's up? What's up, everybody? You're listening to the Data is My Science podcast, the show that makes data a passion. I am your host, Dapper Data. Today, I have a very, very special guest on here. This guy is a genius. Okay, you'll hear a lot about him. You hear a lot about him in a few. But before I start, right, I want to highlight some of the things that I've gone over in the past. Right, I've done programming languages. Right, we've delved into to several topics related to data science, data analytics, artificial intelligence, machine learning, all that good stuff. Sometimes I like to dive into a specific field of interest. Okay. And right now, what we're going to do is have a topic, a conversation on healthcare and how AI and ML impacts that. All right. So I brought a special guest on. His name is Joe Brew. Very, very intelligent person. And if you don't know, data science and big data analytics can provide practical insights and aid in the decision making of strategic decision concerning things like healthcare systems, right? And it helps build a comprehensive view of the patients, the consumers, and more. And so when we think about healthcare, okay, when I think about healthcare, especially right now, right, I think about the pandemic that's going on. And with the current pandemic going on, data science will probably be the way that we solve many of those crucial problems and answer many of those crucial questions that we're uncertain about. So I just want everybody to give a warm welcome to Joe Brew. Say, what's up, Joe?
Thanks so much. What's up?
Yeah, yeah,
Appreciate
yeah.
it.
So Joe is a data scientist, right? I call myself a data scientist, but I think Joe might be several levels ahead of me. Based off of his history, he'll be able to tell you a bit about himself with his background in public health. All right, and so Joe has worked in infectious disease control surveillance, monitoring, and case finding in places ranging from Nepal to Florida in the U.S. Which is actually where he's from. Are you from Gainesville, Florida, or are you from
I
another part
am
of Florida?
Gainesville,
Okay, okay,
Florida, Gator Country.
great, great, great. So he now focuses on building something that he'll talk a little bit more about called Hyfe, which is an artificial intelligence company which aims to improve respiratory health, remote patient monitoring, and diagnostics by detecting and quantifying cough from ambient noise. So, Joe, please tell them about yourself, man.
Yeah, I mean, thanks so much for having me. I think you've overhyped me a little bit, and I think one of the reasons for my success in the field of data science is not because I'm a genius. In fact, quite the opposite. Often when I find myself with other data scientists, I'm the stupid one in the room. But I think of stupidity as a feature and not a bug sometimes, in the sense that it keeps you humble and it helps you focus on the low hanging fruit, right? And so, this is by ways of introduction. Like, so many data scientists are enamored by the really hard problems. Can we use this to predict the next tornado or something?
Right,
Meanwhile,
right.
there's a lot of not that hard problems to solve that are super important for humanity, right? And I think rather than being distracted by some of the hardest problems, which, I mean, all the geniuses out there, go ahead, solve the hard problems. I'm going to focus on the easy ones. And my career has been marked, I would say, by trying to use the best methods, so the newest models and approaches and methodologies, not to solve the hardest problems, but to solve the most important problems, right?
Mhm.
So and I'll give you like a trivial example. A hard problem might be predicting whether somebody is gonna click a like on this photo or not on Instagram. That's pretty hard, right? You got to
Mhm.
cross demographics and the characters through the photos. Meanwhile, an important problem is figuring out where people have tuberculosis or COVID-19, because
Mhm.
they're going to be an infectious agent in their community. They're going to infect their loved ones, and it's going to keep a pandemic rolling along, right? But it turns out it's actually a lot easier to find people with the disease than it is to predict their preferences and photo likes. But almost all of the data science is focused on the latter, right? Click rates and maximizing ads
You're
and things like
right.
this. And so coming to data science, I mean, I consider myself a public health scientist first and foremost. I happen to be a data scientist because every scientist has to be a data scientist in the year 2022. But
Yeah.
coming to data science with this public health approach, I'm not at all enamored. I'm not distracted by which problem is harder or easier. I'm focused, laser focused on finding those problems which have the greatest impact if solved, right?
Mm.
And for me, one of those is detecting when people have disease, right? Because the way we do surveillance right now, the way we monitor to see, hey, is there an outbreak? We wait for people to get really sick, and then for those people to show up at an emergency room and say, I'm really sick, and then we check a little box and we send that box to the state, and the state sends it to the CDC, and then somebody at the CDC looks at a spreadsheet and says, hey, that's strange. A lot of people seem to be coughing in Atlanta,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But what Hyfe emerged as was not is this idea that why do we wait for people to get really sick and then go tell us that they're sick to act, when you and me and about everybody else we know is carrying an internet connected microphone around in their pocket right now,
Right.
right?
Right.
And so rather than waiting for them to say, hey, I'm sick, why not just pick up the obvious? Which, and it's hard to tell somebody's sick. I mean, what are you going to do? Get them to stick a thermometer in their, no, get them to
Right.
do an antigen test up their nose? You're going to get them to do a push survey every. So, what are the telltale symptoms of respiratory illness that are not hard to capture? Right? Again, I'm
Mhm.
not fascinated by the hard problems. I'm not smart enough for the hard problems. The easy problem, cough. Cough is a unique, very telltale indicator of respiratory distress and disease, right? And it's pretty easy to capture. It doesn't sound that much like other things. If I cough,
Right.
it's a pretty clear acoustic signature, right?
Mhm.
And so with the beginning of the pandemic, what I did was identified, hey, here's something very important, not something very hard, but something very important. What if we just knew when and where people were coughing? We didn't have enough tests back then. We couldn't PCR everybody. We couldn't do antigen tests. But if you just know when and where people are coughing, you can help public health authorities, control a pandemic. You can help notify people and say, hey, your cough is sounding worse, or you're coughing more frequently, right? You could build a heat
Right.
map, at the level of a
Mhm.
country, but also at the level of even a school, and say, "Ooh, the third grade wing coughs have increased significantly in the last week. Maybe we should block off third grade rather." And maybe you could prevent closing an entire school if you just close off third
Mhm.
grade, right? So this is it's not a genius idea, and it's certainly not a genius level problem to solve. It just took somebody having the initiative to say, hey, let's start counting coughs. Let's start paying attention to cough. And to my amazement, almost nobody was doing it. Nobody was out there trying to quantify cough. We were doing much harder things like, hey, can we detect, Alzheimer's in the tone of your voice? But nobody was saying, hey, what if we just counted coughs among
Right.
those 6 billion microphones floating out there? So that's Hyfe. And that's what I am. I'm a dumb data scientist who likes dumb
Yeah.
but very high impact problems. And that's how Hyfe came along.
So this is very, very interesting, because you have hit something that I guess I would say is unique, right? Because like you said, so many people try to tackle those hard problems, right? We've had a pandemic going on for what, 2+ years, right? Or 2 years or so, and and you see when the pandemic happens, you see all these symptoms, right? You get a list of about, I don't know, you would think that it's the same symptoms that are going on and in the flu, right? It's the same symptoms going everywhere. I'm like, I just don't know, right? But if you pinpoint a common symptom, right, that common denominator, across multiple different diseases and stuff, right? The cough, right? Everybody's been talking about the cough for years. Like you said, right? The cough is something that is captured. If you look at majority of these respiratory diseases, right, the cough is there, right? And so, how often are you coughing? How many times, right? Is it a hard cough versus a soft cough, right? Is it coming up with phlegm versus that or something like that? All that stuff could be detected and could matter, right? Across being able to come up with a aha moment, if you will, right? So when you thought of the cough, right, that's, I think of it as genius, right? Because it's something that's there, that's been there for so long, right? But nobody's really said, hey, look, let's just capture something so simple, right, and turn it
Yeah,
as
yeah. And
into.
And I think, I mean, if you talk to respiratory health professionals, you talk to doctors and pathologists and epidemiologists, everybody will tell you cough is important. So it's
Right.
not like we came up with this idea that, hey, guys, cough matters.
Hmm.
It's that we came up with the notion that, hey, this thing that all of the doctors are saying is really, really important. And in fact, it's so important
Hmm.
that the doctors ask you when you go to the doctor, They don't ask you, hey, are you hot or cold today? They would never ask you that. They're going to take your temperature. They use a machine to measure,
Mm-hmm.
right? A tool. They don't ask you like, hey, are you getting fatter or skinnier? They're not going to ask you that. It's absurd to ask. They're going to put you on a
Right.
scale and they're going to weigh you, and then they're going to write down a little number in a book. They're not going to ask you like, hey, how's your blood pressure? They're going to put a cuff
Mm-hmm.
on your arm and they're going to measure it. But weirdly, doctors will ask you. They say, hey, Bobby, how's your cough, man?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And it's a crazy question because, first of
Yeah.
all, why are they not measuring it? You measure everything in medicine. But for some reason, rather than measuring this, I'm just going to ask. And then, secondly, even if you want to answer, you don't even know how to answer. I mean, like, does anybody
Yeah.
really know?
Yeah, you're
We
right.
reduce it to this binary, like, good, bad, much, few, uh,
Mm-hmm.
wet, dry. Like, we reduce this super rich acoustic information to this really, you know, dry, maybe 6, 10 words to describe it. And then the doctor's like, okay, well, I'm going to give you another round of antibiotics. So they're already making clinical decisions based
Mm-hmm.
on these things. But
And
nobody was actually using tools to measure it because it was a little bit harder than a thermometer. It was a little bit harder than a blood pressure cuff,
right.
right? It's something that you can't just spot. You actually have to observe it for a little while. You can't watch somebody for 15 seconds and see how their cough is. You have to actually let them go for an hour or two or a day and get those coughs. But we happen to live at a really cool time. If you wanted to come up with a cough detector or a cough quantifier or a cough analyzer in 2005, man, you were screwed. What are you going to do? Like
Mhm.
send people home with a microphone and stuff?
Yeah.
2022, everybody has one of these things. They
Everybody
have a
has it.
microphone connected to the internet. And not
Mhm.
only do they have it,
I'm ready.
you don't have to say, yeah, exactly. You don't even have to say, hey, Bobby, man, take to the bathroom with you because I really want to get your coughs, even when the steam is coming from the shower and see what happens. I don't even have to ask because you're going to take it with you anyway. Everybody
Yeah.
goes to the bathroom with their phone, right? Like everybody takes it to their bedroom, everybody takes it to work, everybody takes it everywhere. So people have this microphone they carry around everywhere, right? It's connected to the internet, meaning you could retrieve the sounds from that if you have basically turn them on. And meanwhile,
Mhm.
instead of using that amazing tool that humanity created in the last few years, doctors are saying, "Hey, how's your cough?" Right? So
Yeah.
again, I want to emphasize this was not it's not a genius thing. Cough is important. Everybody knows cough's important. You got kids, right? When you hear
Yeah.
your kid cough, you're listening and you're thinking, "Oh man, that sounds bad."
Yeah. Yeah.
Like we all know, we know intuitively that it matters. Doctors know. Doctors listen to cough.
Mhm.
But for some reason, nobody's putting two and two together, which is how we have methods nowadays in data science, which can take a continuous stream of audio and identify events. These are not new methods. I'm not smart enough to invent methods like that. Meanwhile, we have tools that people are carrying around because they want to with microphones. Meanwhile, we have all of the medical epidemiological minds in the world saying, "Oh my gosh, cough isn't so important. But we don't have enough tests to know who's sick where."
Mhm.
And all you just got to piece it together and say, "Oh, we should turn on the microphones,
Yeah.
right? And we should use them for something other than, hey Siri, can give me directions." We can use them to generate a public good, which is data about where symptoms are occurring in real time, not three
Right.
days later once the symptoms get really bad.
No, absolutely. And, I mean, people don't understand, like, we have the technology available, right? To do these things. I mean, you have, like, something that you frequently use, right? Being able to take that to be able to collect a bunch of data, like your phones, right? And then even, I mean, going back to where you said solving something that's very hard, right? I remember when I was going through the beginning of my dissertation for my PhD for data science, I'm sitting there thinking, what hard problem can I try to solve, right? Which they told me that I shouldn't try to solve the hard problem. I should try to graduate. But at the beginning, I was trying to solve like this hard, complicated problem. I'm sitting there like, oh yeah, flood predictions, right? Flood prediction would be awesome if I could predict the floods and all that stuff. And I had this idea, right? I was like, man, what in the world is being utilized the most in this world is transportation, right? Cars and things like that. Why not have sensors on there to collect data over time and stuff like that, and eventually you'll be able to, collect enough data to be able to say, look, there's a lot of rain precipitation here versus here, blah blah. Collect all the data you can and be able to say, hey, look, it travel it's common to have floods over here because when the rain starts flowing, X versus Y, blah blah and all that stuff. Anyways, you just hit the nail on the head. You're spot on when you say that using a common device, right? That common denominator, something that everybody is using to be able to collect the data to be able to solve a problem so simple, right? I mean, you're talking
Totally,
about
and
cost.
I think, I mean, you're onto something else with academia, right? Which is, it takes a smart person and forces them to be original and to solve a new
Mhm.
problem and to do something innovative and different. And that's what all of academia is, right? If you
Mhm.
do a PhD saying, "Hey, I used a method created by somebody else and I just implemented it and I made the world a slightly better place," that's not a PhD. Nobody's going to
Right,
pat you on the back for that. What they want is for you to do something different. And at some
right.
point, what we've ended up with, I mean, think of the number of dissertations that have been written. Think of the number of academic articles that have been published, and
Mhm.
99% of them are useless because
Mhm.
they're looking for new problems. Because I mean, that's what you do. Like, what's a new original problem that you're going to solve, rather than saying, hey, you know what? There's some really old problems that still need some
Right.
solutions, right? And I come my background in public health is in malaria. We've known how to treat malaria for
Uh-huh.
100 years. We know how to prevent malaria for 100 years. We know that bed nets work. We know that indoor fumigation works. We know that
Mhm.
intermittent preventive treatment on pregnant women work. We know all these things. Yet somehow 500,000 kids die every year of malaria because we have, instead of figuring out how to solve the problem, the big problem of malaria, right?
Mhm.
We have a lot of smart people dedicating their mind to in trying to identify new problems to be original. I don't want to be original. I want to be, I want to recycle good old time tested ideas and implement
Yeah.
and make them better. And so again, I want to emphasize this because hopefully, if somebody's feeling a little mediocre or out there and feels like I'm not smart enough to do something, you're definitely smart enough to do something because you're probably smarter than me. What you need to do is just get the impetus and the energy to do and to not
Mhm.
get lost in the intellectual kind of playground of, ooh, I had the most original thing. Or unlike Johnson and Franklin, I did it this way or that way. Or my approach is a slight, divergence from this. Like, academia has its place, and I'm not trying to put them down too hard, but
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of space out there, especially in data science, to combine, worthy problems, impactful problems with all these new methods that are just coming out all the time. I mean,
Mhm.
random forest is something that, you know people didn't know the phrase 20 years ago. And even in
You're right.
2022, 99.9% of people don't even know how to run the code. You don't even have to understand the mathematics
Yeah.
of it. Just to be able to write
Mhm.
in Python or R, run a random forest, you have like the most powerful weapon in the universe right now. And all you have to do is find a problem. It doesn't have to be an original problem. Just go find a problem. It
Mhm.
could be school recidivism or dropouts. It could be, I don't know, preventing teenage pregnancies. It could be,
Mhm.
you know, fixing malaria, whatever. Find a
Yeah.
problem and see if you can apply some cool methods to it. And it turns out that there's a lot, there's a there. There's a lot to be done.
No, no, absolutely, man. And it's crazy. I mean, we need to talk even more about stuff because I didn't know that you actually had a specialty in relation to malaria and stuff. And I actually go out. I own a restaurant in Ghana. The audience knows, and so I go out there literally about three, 4 times a year, right? And malaria is pretty prominent out there, so it's pretty big out there. And you got to take the pill and all that sort of, or whatever, multiple pills or however they have it set up. But it's interesting, that's definitely an interesting topic, to definitely discuss and dive into, you know.
Yeah, man.
So
So exactly. So you've lived it firsthand. Here's this problem. Like, there's a pill you can take it for prevention. There's another pill you can take it to treat it. Right. There's mosquito
mhm,
nets which you can sleep under. Yet
exactly.
somehow, even among the sub-Saharan African countries, Ghana's doing pretty well. Right.
Mhm,
But even Ghana, it's still coming around. There's mosquitoes buzzing around, and they're killing people. And they're not killing random people. They're killing children, the most
yeah.
vulnerable people. And they're not killing random children. They're killing poor children out in the boonies. Right. Like, that's an emergency. And if we
Mhm,
as humanity had a heart, we would all be, thinking, what are we going to do about this? I heard that 17 more kids died last night in Ghana. Like,
yeah,
emergency, let's go. And instead,
yeah.
we're like, I wonder if I can get an interview at Facebook so
Right.
that, I can work on their like revenue, whatever, get people to click
Yeah,
more
you're right.
buttons in the right. And I'm kind of disappointed, but I don't think it's uh the fault of those engineers who end up. I'm not trying to crap on Facebook either, but I don't think it's
Yeah.
the fault of people who choose not to. I think a lot of people just don't realize how powerful they are. If you know a little bit of statistics, if you know a little bit of code, if you know a little bit of data science, there's probably an NGO or a health organization or a ministry or a department or whatever
Hmm.
out there that desperately needs somebody like you, right? And
Yeah.
and it's kind of a matchmaking problem. Like, how do you find those problems that need solvers, and how do you pair them with the solvers?
Yeah. I think so many people are trying to do those, trying to get noticed as somebody that has been the next Mark Zuckerberg, right, or the next person that changes the world, right? And when they're creating, or they're trying to, be innovative, and they're trying to have a solution for a problem that nobody's ever worked on. But like you said, there's so many problems out there that people have worked on, but they need more people to continue to invest time and energy on, and if we could do that, I mean, that those problems could finally be solved, right? Eventually, all the masterminds out there, right? Has Hyfe been able to work with? Have you seen it be able to actually, be implemented and work out there in the industry, in the real world right now?
Yeah, so I mean, Hyfe is new. We're a startup. We started with basically the beginning of the pandemic, and
Hmm.
we also took the uncomfortable route of kind of creating a new field, and that
Yeah.
field we call acoustic epidemiology, right? Acoustic being
Hmm.
sound, and epidemiology, the study of disease among populations. And so, like, we there's not a lot that's actually known about cough, because there's never been a kind of reliable, standard, regularly used cough monitor. No, it doesn't exist. Everybody knows the thermometer. If you want to measure temperature,
Right.
you get a thermometer. Everybody knows the blood, or let's say the heart rate monitor, right? If you want to get how many times your heart beating, like, you can put this little thing around your chest or even on your watch nowadays, and you get like, oh,
Right.
my heart's beating more or less. Like, nobody really has quantified cough before.
Hmm.
And therefore, because it's never been quantified, the science that you build on top of quantification has never emerged, right? With malaria, for example, people have looked a lot at temperature in malaria, and there's
Hmm.
all sorts of differential diagnostic guidelines. Hey, if the person was here and they have a temperature of above this, go ahead and treat, even if you don't have access to a rapid diagnostic test, because the likelihood is they have malaria. So we've learned that temperature is a pretty good indicator for malaria
Right.
in
But you got
tropical
to be in a certain location, right? Probably it
exactly in
makes more.
tropical regions. If you have a fever in Canada, like, it's probably something else, right? The
Right.
with cough, we've learned almost nothing in
Mm,
the last 2,000 years, because doctors pay a lot of attention to cough, but nobody's collecting data on cough. So we've never built databases on cough, and nobody could therefore do inference based on cough. And so
man,
so
is it too
let's
common?
let
Is it? I
it's so
mean,
common, but it's commonly ignored or commonly
mm,
overlooked or commonly reduced to absurd binaries like better or worse, many or
right.
few, right?
Mm,
And so we are finding things in cough that it's not that it's debunking the previous stuff; it's that nobody's even looked before. So
right.
what happens, for example, in a COVID-19 infected individual if they're coughing, let's say 200 times a day, and they start coughing 400 times a day? Does that
Mm,
mean that their symptoms are getting worse? Does that mean that the disease is actually getting worse, that the infection is getting worse? What
good
happens
question.
if somebody who's normally not coughing starts coughing only at night, but not during the day? Does that
Right. Which
indicate, for example, postnasal drip or something? We don't. Nobody's had the answer to these questions because nobody's even looked at it, and so we're not in like the evidence-based medicine field right now because there's no evidence base on which evidence to base our medicine on. We're in the evidence generating medicine phase right now. We are actively working with researchers. We have trials going on right now where we're looking at, for example, among those infected with tuberculosis and those not infected with tuberculosis on treatment, right, at 2 weeks versus on treatment at 3 months versus on treatment at 6 months, what happens
mm,
to their cough patterns? And
mm,
the idea, the plausible hypothesis here is that you will see that cough is a leading indicator of outcomes, right? So with
mm,
tuberculosis, for example, it is often the case that the bug in your lungs is a bad match for the drug you're getting, and because
mm,
antibacterial resistance and things like this, and that's
right.
tragic. That's really bad for the person being treated because they're not recovering, and it's really bad for humanity because we're creating antibiotic resistant bugs And
Right.
so what we're interested to see, for example, and this is one of many examples, is if you monitor symptoms during the 6 months of tuberculosis chemotherapy, could you identify those who are not responding well to treatment? Could you see that, you know
Mm,
what? Bobby's been on chemo for 4 weeks and his cough's not getting better. And you could come
mm,
and take him in and evaluate and see like, oh, maybe this chemical cocktail he's getting is not the right one.
mm,
Maybe he needs something else, right? And that might save your life. We don't know. We're so early on that we just don't know. I mean, another case where I think cough is really interesting in a population we're looking at is the elderly. So the
mm,
elderly are especially vulnerable to uh, cough because one the kinds of diseases that have cough are more likely to kill the elderly than somebody like young and healthy, right? So
mm.
influenza, COVID-19, these things you might have a bad week, somebody else might die, right?
Right.
But
Right.
secondly, the elderly are especially vulnerable because they might not be cognitively able in some cases to communicate or their symptoms to say, "Hey, I'm getting worse, doctor. I've had a really bad cough." They might not even be cognitively able to be aware of those symptoms. Like I have
Mm.
a elderly grandmother who's a little forgetful, and so maybe she was up all night coughing, and the next morning you say, "How are you, Grandma?" And she says, "Oh, great! It's so great to see you." And it's not that
Right.
she's not trying; she just doesn't remember. And so to have a machine, to have a tool that can help quantify and alert and say, "Wow, coughs went up 400%." Maybe you
Right.
should get it checked out. I think there's certain populations that are going to benefit massively from that, and others that, hey, maybe this is something you use when you're checked into a hospital or something, but not in your day to day.
Yeah, when I think about coughing, I mean, now that I think about it, I mean, if I've ever gone in, I don't know if I've ever gone into the hospital because I had coughing, right? I had coughing combined with something else, but in my eyes, I was always thinking, man, this just means that I had nasal drip or something like that. And but nobody ever I have a younger son, right? Actually, who who would be coughing, and then their response is to give him something that tones down the cough. That was the first time that I ever heard of somebody getting something for coughing, right? And it was like, but still, when you really think about it, it's like, what does that really mean? What does it mean that they're coughing, right? It's so general. It's such a something that people could say, well, okay, they have coughing, but even though they have coughing, it could mean so many different things. But they don't. They just have one
Yeah,
solution for coughing, right? To tone it down, right, or to stop the symptom, but not really to say what does it mean. You cough,
exactly. Yeah,
between this
and it's
many times, that many times. They don't say that, right?
because they have nothing to base it on. I mean, all good medicine is evidence based medicine. Good doctors
Mhm,
are not making it up. They're not using their intuition. They're looking at the cold hard data and they're saying, look, based on your profile, based on these risks and benefits, I'm going to treat you with this. Now, what are
mhm.
they supposed to do with cough? What do they do when you come and say, hey, I coughed 250 times yesterday, but I coughed 490 times today? They
Right.
have no idea because there's no evidence base. And so we are in a panic as fast as we can trying to build up an evidence base. And we are trying to empower every researcher we meet who has any inkling to dabble into cough research to say, hey, let us send you some phones. Let's get on the call. Let's come up with a protocol together. Let's get it through an ethical committee, through an IRB, and let's
Mhm,
generate that evidence because and we're finding super interesting things, right? I'll give you an anecdote which I think is just fascinating. There was a
mhm,
study in northern Spain we did in Navarra, which is a region in northern Spain, and we got a whole community, a whole town to use Hyfe. And the idea
mhm.
was like, hey,
Nice.
we can see coughs over space and time, and we had some great collaborators. There's some really enthusiastic researchers recruiting participants, kind of, and there was one young woman who on February 6th, 2021, she was using Hype just at night, just to record her
Mhm,
nighttime cough because she didn't want her battery to drain too much during the day. She's like a phone power user. I get it. And she was coughing 2 times a night, 0 times a night, 1 time a night, between 0 and 2 times every night she would cough, right? It was kind of like
mhm.
normal humans cough, even healthy humans cough. Uh, and then February 6th, she coughed 12 times. And February 7th, she coughed 20 times. And then
Oh man.
February 8th, so she went from 2 to 12 to 20, right? That's a tenfold increase. But it's still not that much. It's still just, twice an hour or something like that. And on February 8th, she found out she was a contact of a COVID positive person. And so because of that, even though she had no symptoms, she was told by the health services to come get a test. So she got a test, they swabbed her nose, she had COVID. So
Hmm.
she didn't find out until February 8th. And she professed to be uh, asymptomatic. She didn't have symptoms. And it wasn't
Hmm.
even a lie because she didn't know. It was just that she was symptoms ignorant. She was not aware of the fact that her cough had increased 10x. Because
Yeah.
cough is not something you're aware of. Like, what's your heart rate at right now? 63, 75,
Yeah.
58? You don't know. It's like
You don't
you
know.
just don't know. You need a machine to measure
Right.
some things. What's your
You only
temperature? You
know
know,
if
and
it
you're like,
just if like if it's
if it's
ridiculous.
abnormal, right? If it's
Right.
ridiculous.
If it's abnormal. Yeah.
Yeah, and she actually later she did get some symptoms. And so February 9th, February 10th, she started coughing more. And by that point, hey, maybe Hyfe's not so valuable. You don't need a tool to tell you you're coughing if you know you're coughing. But February 6th and February 7th, Hyfe, the app, the algorithms picked up on her cough and started counting a big increase in cough. And she didn't know. And I think, imagine if we all used this kind of tech and we got that notification. And instead of waiting until February 8th to test her, we had tested her February 6th when her cough started. We would have probably found that she was COVID positive then. And
Hmm.
maybe she would have not infected more members of the community. And maybe we could
Exactly.
slow down or turn the tide on a out of control pandemic without necessarily having more PCR tests, right? Without waiting for them to flood our emergency rooms, without waiting for the bodies to start piling up. And I mean, this is an optimistic vision of the future, but the tech is there. I mean, it exists, right?
Mhm.
We can count coughs, and obviously cough matters. It's not like we're coming and telling you to, hey, you should start paying attention to this. Everybody knows cough matters. Everybody who's been around a
Mhm.
sick person knows cough matters. And
Yeah,
so
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
I'm
I mean,
super excited about
when,
generating that evidence.
yeah, yeah, because when you cough, I mean, if I cough around somebody, shoot, I mean, if you during this pandemic, right? If you were at the airport and you started coughing, people would look at you side eye. I mean, there's no doubt about it, right? Cough matters. People would look at you say, "What? Are you okay? Do you have COVID?" That. I mean, that's the first
Yeah,
thought,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
You sneezing too, right? I mean, and you actually hit something interesting, because it started to make me think when you are even asleep, right? The coughing spells that go on, you're not paying attention to that. You're just trying to go to sleep, right? You're trying
Of
to keep
course, yeah. You
trying
might not even be awake. You might be coughing in your
to
sleep, right?
yeah, yeah. So that stuff matters, right? And that data that can be collected could actually give you telltale signs of so many different things, but nobody's saying, "Hey, let me capture your cough while you're asleep," or cough in general, but cough while you're sleeping, let alone,
Yeah, yeah.
it's
No,
a
well, hey, we're saying it though. We're saying, hey, use
right,
Hype and let
right.
us capture these coughs and let's start generating that evidence. But we're finding super interesting things. Most people don't cough at all when they sleep, right?
Mm,
But some people cough a lot when they sleep, chronic coughers in some cases. And some people cough only when they sleep. And it has to do with the position. And they have some sort of thing that, maybe they have postnasal drip and it's irritating their
yeah,
throat when they're horizontal. And I mean, but all of that is to say that when you cough matters, right?
right,
You might be able to know whether somebody has A or B. If you find that somebody's only coughing when they're sleeping and you're a doctor, maybe that helps you kind of like, do I want to treat with that? Do I want to examine this? Should I give them this diagnostic test? Should I do this? I had what you mentioned, like, oh yeah, sleep is a hard time to monitor. My son got very sick, I don't know, about 6 months ago, my 3-year-old son. And so I was, doing the parent thing where you're just up late, you're stressing, you're trying to
mm.
comfort them, fever, cough, the whole 9 yards.
Right.
And he ended up actually having to be hospitalized for a couple of days. He had kind of a
Oh man.
bad pneumonia. It wasn't COVID, but it was just a viral pneumonia. Um, but one of the things what I was using Hyfe, of course, because it's my own
Yeah,
company,
yeah,
and monitoring his cough and looking at it. And man, he coughed 140 times today. He coughed 200 times today. He coughed 300 times today, and seeing it. But of course, at some point, I'd be like laying down in the little bed next to him, and I'd fall asleep. And
yeah,
so me, the observer, the parent, the guardian, the safekeeper of my son, I sleep too. And whether I'm coughing or not, there
yeah.
was nobody observing his symptoms
Mhm.
during that time. And it was actually really nice for me to wake up a few hours later and see, like, oh, look at that. There was no coughs between 2 a.m. and 6 a.m. That means he was sleeping soundly and like that. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Versus a night where you'd be coughing through the night, or I'd see at 4, there was a big cluster of coughs that I just slept through because I was
Yeah,
tired
yeah.
as hell,
Then you
So
start gauging like temperature and all this. Is it too? is the heat up too high? You know, things like, I mean, it's just so many variables. You got my mind spinning over here, Joe.
Yeah, yeah, and you know, and most of us don't care that much about cough, and I actually don't care that much about cough because it's not a big part of my life. I don't have chronic cough. I don't have tuberculosis. You know, the but there's a huge population out there with COPD, with asthma, with chronic cough,
Mhm.
who it's a huge quality of life issue. And what you just mentioned at the airport, right? Oh, somebody starts coughing, and you're like, "Hey, you got COVID."
Yeah,
You're
yeah, yeah.
experiencing that as the non-cougher, right? And I
Mhm.
experience that as a
Right.
non-cougher. Now, put yourself in a minute in the shoes of the cougher. That maybe, yeah, maybe they're sick and they might have COVID, but in a lot of cases, what if they've just been like that for a year, 2 years, 5 years? They're coughing all the time. And we've heard of people, for example, with chronic cough who can no longer go to restaurants because it's so embarrassing. Because I mean, think about it.
Uh-huh.
We're in the middle of a pandemic and you're sitting there.
Yeah.
They're not infectious with anything. It's a condition of
Right.
just a chronic condition of their lungs. But everybody in the restaurant's looking over at them, you know, asking the waiter, "Hey, would you mind if we moved over there?" Like, and so it's a huge quality of life for a lot of people. And what you just mentioned, like, oh man, what if you turn up the heat? What if you turn on the heat? These people, chronic coughers, they are like the best citizen scientists in the world. They are experimenting on themselves constantly, looking at temperature, looking at humidity, looking at what they eat, and seeing what affects it. And for them, they're like our biggest power users, right? They love Hype because they finally have a tool besides their own impressions, their own sensations to say, hey, for me, my triggers are cold air in the morning, like that, you know, or for me, it really gets worse in the evening from 6 to 8. So I go out to lunch, but I don't go out to dinner. I mean, these kinds of things we've learned from them because they're the cough, you know, power users.
Right, 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 right. No, I mean, man, I think you're going to do something that's really going to, if not change the world now, right? If people continue to collect data and do research on this topic, ultimately contributing to it, right? Similar to PhD, dissertation, things like that, and continue to contribute to it, they're going to change the world. I think with what you have, right, the device, the product that you built, in your company, I think is going to make a huge difference, right? It's data that's being collected that nobody has really touched on. And I think that, what you're doing, is something that is impactful to the world, man. So, I thank you for even doing something like that, right? Um,
Yeah,
you know,
I don't know if it's
I,
gonna be. I don't know if it's gonna be us. I hope selfishly it's gonna be us, but somebody's
yeah,
gonna do it. It's inevitable. I mean, there's
somebody,
there's there's
right?
such cool stuff out there, and there's so much that can be done right now with sound, with acoustics and health, and we finally have the means to do it. Not just when you're at the doctor's office and they have their cool instruments, but we have the means to do it 24 hours a day, meaning that we can find people before they get sick, and we can track their, you know, kind of voyage into sickness and disease onset and all these phases that usually we don't get to observe in medicine. So I'm super excited about it too, you know.
Right, right, right. So you seem like you have been a data enthusiast for a long time, related to whether it was healthcare or other things, and I really want to touch on another avenue that you've gone down, which is something called data brew, right? I think that that is something that is also ingenious. I know you don't like that term. It seems like you don't want to claim it, right? But I think you have done something else that's really helping out a lot of individuals, better explore things, right? So, talk a little bit about Data Brew. How is that really helping organizations, individuals, better explore and use information, right? And have you been able to help specific organizations out there? Probably can't talk about everybody, but if there's anybody that you can, touch on, any use case you can touch on, that'd be great.
Yeah, I mean, Data Brew emerged really organically, and Hyfe is built around a product and a concept and a very clear idea of acoustic epidemiology and the science of cough and paying, kind of making cough count, paying attention, giving cough the attention it deserves. Data Brew is much more responsive and reactive. So Data Brew emerged organically from what me and probably you and many others see in data science, which is there's just a huge demand for it. There's a lot of people that have a lot of data and kind of need help wrestling it. And there are not enough people out there who have the kind of skills or resources to handle it, right? So
Hmm.
so some things that might be kind of uh, standard stuff in a data scientist toolkit, right? To read in some messy data, to munge it, to process it, to merge things, to access databases, to make charts, to make maps, to make basic statistical models. That kind of stuff is actually really useful in the real world, right? Again, without
Right.
having to reinvent some new problem. And there are organizations that are desperate for it and really need it. And so Data Brew emerged from what I was kind of hearing from the market, which is that, like, hey, a lot of people need assistance. They need help with their data. They need help handling their data. They need help collecting their data. Basically, the whole data science life cycle, right?
Yeah, that whole
From data.
transformation cycle, right? From ingesting
Exactly.
to collecting, all that stuff, right?
Yeah, and to the very end, which is they need help communicating their data and disseminating their data, and
Yeah.
making sure that the world knows about. And it's one thing, oh, I made a Word document, and it's another thing, oh, I built a website with interactive maps or a web application or something like this. And so we started working with organizations that were in this. In our case, and it's partially just because it's the field, me and my brother are both data scientists, and we co-founded it.
Mhm.
We started working mostly in development economics and public health. So a lot in the development and health space. And most of our clients are exactly that, public health groups, research groups, or agencies, or
Mhm.
institutions that often are overwhelmed by data. They have so much information, and that data is not being exploited. Right? They're just sitting on a gold mine, and they don't have the key to the safe, or whatever. Sorry for my failed metaphors, but like they want to unlock it. They say, hey man, we've collected this and that, and we've got this and that, and we don't know quite how to see what's in
Right,
there, because at some point it gets beyond the limits of a spreadsheet, right?
right,
And
right,
so Data Brew in some ways is philosophically very aligned with Hype, which is we don't have some crazy new method. We didn't invent something amazing. We're not smart enough for that. What we have is the methods, the kind of tried and true methods of data science, and the willingness to roll up our sleeves and listen to an organization and hear what their problems are and say, hey, let's get to work, right? And so
right,
so
right.
to bring it back to malaria, because that's kind of a common thread now, is one of the projects we're working on is a huge malaria research elimination research initiative, where they're looking at kind of novel methods for eliminating malaria. Can we use a kind of new agent and mass drug administration, and see if we can reduce child mortality and community level interventions and stuff like that. And they have massive needs for data, not just for analyzing their data and seeing the effectiveness of the intervention, but they have massive operational needs for data. They need to know how to get a field worker from point A to 8 hours north to point B at
Right.
longitude, latitude, whatever, at this house. And that's a non-trivial thing when you're outside of the realm of Google Maps, right? You need to actually
Yeah.
maybe print out some satellite maps, and you need to calculate travel times. Maybe you need to track that field worker's location, and they need to capture data but offline. So you need to build something like a kind of offline form for it, right?
Right.
And maybe you need kind of multi-language ability for this, and maybe you need some reporting, because as the field workers are out there collecting data in the field, and you don't have contact, because maybe you need a kind of a regular, hey, what's the data coming in, and you need to see if in real time if the intervention is working, or failing massively, because that might, maybe you would call it quits early if you see that it's not having an effect. Or so there's all of this requires the kind of data science tool set, right? Which is ingest data, process it, transform it, analyze it, visualize it. And it's not the academic approach of wait till the end and do all of that to get a tidy little PDF to put out on the internet as your paper. It's in real life, right? And so that's what Data Brew does. We're very reactive and reactionary. People come to us and we say, "What's your problem? Tell us about it," and we try to help them, right? And
Yeah.
again, we work mostly in public health and development economics.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, Data Brew was very fascinating to me because you are, definitely solving another problem that a lot of industries have out there. When you think about uh, they're trying to figure out, one, I always see when I go out to customers and consult, especially in the government, they're like, I don't even know what question to ask myself, right? From a data science standpoint, right? I have all this data. I hear everybody talking about data, 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 and it's big, right? I'm collecting all of it, and it's only growing, right? It's not stopping. So I don't know what data to collect, what data is very important to collect, what data matters, right, to the questions I'm trying to answer, and I don't know, you know, um, I don't know how to jump in, right? It's like jump rope. I don't know how to jump in, right? Back in the day when they used to jump rope and hopscotch and all that stuff. I just don't know at what point to jump in and start, analyzing this data and, even all the way down to the visualizations. Like you said, you have CEOs and CTOs, right? C-level execs. They don't care about the SQL commands that you're running, right? They don't care about the Python. They don't care about the R. They don't care about any of that stuff that you're doing. They don't care about the Excel spreadsheets. They give all these rows and columns. They like the visualizations, right? Because it helps them make that decision at the end of the day, right? So then that's another aspect of data science that people that's very valuable that people do not portray within their organization. So they have to hire somebody like you all to be able to handle and jump in and consult and actually implement some of those things, right?
Yeah, which is actually very bad because I don't scale that well, right? Like
Mhm.
maybe I would take like one more client, or I can't take 1,000 more clients,
Right.
right? Like, and so one of the things we've begun doing is to really focus on kind of training and education, right? And that is what we want to do is and it's a not great, it's not a great business model, but I think
Mhm.
it's a good system. Is what we want to do is train organizations and empower organizations so that they can close the feedback loop themselves. They're out there getting data. They need to be able to process that data, and they need to visualize that data and analyze that data and then make decisions based on that data. And it's a shame we're just at a weird moment in history where not enough people know how to do it. I mean, imagine like nowadays everybody in the US, for example, can read, right?
Right.
But it wasn't that long ago that reading was a weird thing that like only monks did. And so if you got a letter, you'd have to go find the neighborhood monk and say, "Hey, what did this letter say?" And that's kind of where
Right.
we're at with data scientists. Like I got data, now I got to go find the data scientist or the
Yeah.
analyst or whatever to tell me what it means.
Yeah.
And my
Yeah. And they're
hope, and
trying
I
things
think I
like no code, right? No code solutions and all that stuff. But like you're absolutely right where you have to teach them. That's how you can scale, right? As a business.
exactly, yeah.
Um, I mean, that's the same way I look at it, right? I'm one person, right? I don't even have anybody else working in my company. And so I sat there and I realized at one point I'm implementing all these things, right? I'm sitting there hands on and I can only take like 4 or 5 customers in a year because the scale of the data and all this, it was just too massive, right? But then I realized why not take a step back and teach, right? You teach them how to do the things that you're doing so that they can scale better. But like you said, the business model probably is not ideal, right? But it helps us out, right?
Oh yeah, and I mean, and maybe I mean, it drives you out of if a client, if you teach them everything, they don't need you anymore in theory, right? But I also think that like this is such a fast moving field, and there's so much to do, and there's so much opportunity. It's not like all the data has been analyzed, we're done.
Mhm.
Like there's so much out there that I think it's a scarcity mindset or scarcity mentality would be just so wrong, so misplaced at
Right.
2022 in this field. I think like it's not that data science is like, oh, it's the sexy new profession or it's this. I
Mhm.
think it's just it is every profession is going to be a data science to some extent in the future. And you might be an early arriver at that. But I think that inevitably you will have to know how to deal with data because it is, the currency of our generation. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's a really good thing. There's going to be some uncomfortable shifts along the way, but
Mhm.
I think it's actually really great that we are leaving kind of this data exhaust behind us just through our lived activities, and that we're going to be able to use that to figure out all sorts of things. From I mean, again, for my use case, my passion is about using cough and the sound of that your lungs and your throat and your mouth make, and try to find disease and diagnose it and help people get
Mhm.
better and monitor treatment and stuff. But you can think, I mean, if you were, let's say your passion is making sure that boys finish high school or something like this,
Mhm.
right? Getting those high, unlike in 1950 where you'd have to
Mhm.
like go and dig through file cabinets, there's probably like some state database with every kid, every day's attendance, every single class, right?
Right.
And you can probably build a pretty powerful predictive model to identify the guy that's going to drop out this
Right.
year. And if
Right.
you don't have a lot of resources, which most groups don't have a lot of resources, instead of
Mhm.
going and telling everybody, "Hey, stay in school," you can put all your resources on that really high
Right.
risk kid, the one who's really right at the edge, and
Mhm.
you go to him and you say, "Listen, bud, I got all the resources in the world for you. You can have a tutor for every single one of your classes. You can have a
Hmm.
peer support guy. You can have a role model. I mean, like, let's figure out how to keep you get going, right? And that's from data, and we should be really excited about that opportunity because you couldn't do that in 1950. You know?
You cannot. You cannot. No, absolutely, man. That you really, man, shed some light on a lot of different things, man, throughout this podcast, man. So I don't want to hold you too long, but at the end, I mean, you touched on some things that I really wanted to highlight, right? Hyfe, man, and the difference that it's making in this world is amazing, right? The cough is something that's unique that people are not capturing enough data on. Um, when you think about machine learning and artificial intelligence in the healthcare industry, right? You specifically being in there, do you think that eventually they will take over, right? To take over the healthcare industry, right? Do you see robots, right? Something that our novice audience, and even people who are just fascinated with this podcast, right? They always ask me, do you think machines are going to take over the world, right? Are they going to take over, the healthcare industry, right? Things like that, bringing intelligence to medical devices and machines is what I see, AI and machine learning doing. But I don't know if you can ever take over that hand, right? That emotion, right? That all the different things that a human brings in. What's your thoughts, man?
Yeah, I don't see it as an either or, right? And in
Hmm.
fact, by some definitions, I think machines have taken over
Hmm.
the world, right? So I mean, you go to a doctor's office nowadays, and yeah, there's going to be a human in there to come ask you something. But meanwhile, there's a lot of machines that are sitting there around you. And if you
Right.
had to quantify how many humans are part of this experience and how many robots, you'd say the robots have already won, right? You got the machine attached to the IV, you got the thing measuring the whatever, you got the cables here, you got the graph here,
Yeah,
like the the
they're
the, the
depending on
medical experience. What's that? What's that?
I was saying that they're actually depending on the machines to make their
Yeah,
decisions and
yeah,
stuff.
and
Like,
exactly, the humans, it's not humans versus machines, it's humans and machines. The humans are much better when paired with a machine. A doctor with a thermometer is a very effective doctor, and a doctor without a thermometer just kind of feeling your forehead
yeah,
can't be as good a
you're
doctor,
just a
right?
mom or dad.
Yeah, exactly. They need their machines. And you see this with, like machine aided surgery. Yeah, it's a robot, but behind that robot is a really good surgeon who who's
Right.
who's kind of, and it's, you see it with aviation. Yeah, it's there's an autopilot, but there's also a pilot. And I don't
Right.
really trust the pilot 100% because they make mistakes. I really
Right.
don't trust the autopilot 100%. I like the team. And so I don't
Yeah.
think of it as I don't think of it as an animosity situation. I think, okay, in the future, maybe there will be, let's say, an algorithm that you cough into a microphone and it says, "Hey, you look like you probably have, this disease," right? But I would like if
Right.
there's also a human there that might know you and might understand your value system and might understand that, you know, based on that value system, it's really important that you be treated at home and not in the hospital, or maybe you're, end
Right.
of life. And there's a lot of things that go into clinical decision making that's not just the statistics behind it. But
Yeah.
the doctor is going to do the best when the statistics and the data are very clear to them, and
Mhm.
it's very obvious what that is. And so you don't want doctors to have to be artists, to have to rely on their memory and their impressions and their intuition. You want doctors to have all the data there. Machines are going to be a big part of getting that there, personalized medicine and things like that. But then, yeah, I
Right.
think there's still going to, at least for the foreseeable future, there's going to still going to be a really big place for humans in this system. And
Yeah.
I think that's something to be celebrated. Like you said, the touch. I mean, ultimately, we're primates. You and
Yeah.
I are monkeys, and I like
Yeah.
other monkeys. And when I'm sick, I especially like other monkeys. I like the feel of a hand on my
Mhm.
on my cheek or my forehead or something. And I don't think that's going to get replaced by a machine anytime soon.
No, I agree. And then even when you think about how the human has studied, right, their profession for so long, I don't think that should go away, right? They should be able to vet or approve that machine, right? At the end of the day, the machine is coming up with some type of, diagnosis or they're coming up with whatever they come up with, based off of the data that they've had. But you still have to feed it a certain amount of data, right, and continue to feed it data to make more accurate and efficient decisions. And then as a human, you with your knowledge and your ability and your studies and stuff, from your history, being able to combine that and say, hey, look, this robot or this machine seems like it's not working right. We need to probably replace it, or the data that's coming out just doesn't seem right based off of my message. Let's get somebody else in to look at it, or let's get another robot to look at it, or something like that.
No, absolutely. And I think we have this. There are some tasks that humans are just way better at. We're always going to be better at, or at least for the foreseeable future, we're going to be better at. Like you and I both have very good algorithms running in our brains for detecting emotional distress in voice.
Mm,
Think about like your partner or your kid says something and the tone is a little weird. You say, "Hey, you feeling
right.
all right?" I mean, that's an amazing algorithm in there, which is just based on some tiny little thing in the tone. Machines aren't that good at that yet, right? They're
Mm,
not. Machines aren't very good at humor and timing and things like this. Machines are certainly not good at touch and making humans feel comfortable, and making humans feel safe and stuff. But I mean, let's say you want an image. Hey, what did it
mm,
look like at that? What does the chambers of your heart look like? Do you want somebody to sit in there with a pen and paper and draw it, or do you want to take a photograph? The photograph
right.
is going to be a lot better. Machines are just way
Right.
at imagery than humans, right?
Mhm,
And my suspicion is that machines are going to be way better at sound than humans, and that's why we're
mhm.
kind of one of the bets Hyfe has placed. You can listen to a cough, but the subtle difference between and
Yeah,
you don't hear it.
that's
It just
hard.
doesn't
Yeah,
come
that
out.
sounds
Or
the
whatever.
same to me,
But
right?
a machine in that 1 second took 44,100 samples at different frequencies and can
Right.
actually tell you those differences. And a machine that you could listen to about 10,000 coughs before you just go crazy and say, "Please don't make me listen." A machine can listen to 10 million coughs or 100 million
Yeah,
coughs and begin to
yeah,
say, if you still tell that machine that's what a tuberculosis cough sounds like, that's what a pertussis cough sounds like, that what
yeah.
an influenza cough sounds like, that machine is very patient. That machine's not going to complain, right?
Right,
And it can
right.
learn to listen for certain things. And so that's something that I think is that going to replace a human? No, because humans aren't doing that anyway. Humans aren't
Mhm.
diagnosing based on sound anyway.
Yeah,
Is it going to make a human a way better doctor when they're able
yeah.
to, make sense of the sound of a cough and quantify? Yeah, I think so.
Mm.
Right. And so I think it's a false dichotomy, this kind of humans versus machines future. I think humans with machines, like those are going to be some kick-ass doctors.
Yeah, yeah, I agree, man. I agree, man. So, no, I mean, this has been an amazing podcast, and as everybody knows, I like to end it with a little game called Overrated, Underrated. All right. So, overrated, underrated, as everybody knows, I'm going to ask the guest, whether they believe a certain topic is overrated, underrated, or right where it needs to be. I'll say about 7 or 8 topics, and this just lets the audience know that we like to have fun too. We're not all techie, we like to do things outside of the tech world all the time. So, are you ready, Joe?
I'm ready. I'm ready.
All right, cool. I'm only saying this because in Gainesville, Tennessee, I mean, not Tennessee, I'm sorry, Gainesville, Florida, this was one of the first. So, Gatorade.
Overrated. Just sugar
Overrated?
water. Sugar
Did
water,
you?
man. Just sugar water. They market it as like healthy. What is it? Like just drink Coke. If you want to drink sugar water, at least get the good stuff.
True, true, true. All right, cheese.
Underrated. Cheese is so I live in Europe now, man. Cheese is so good.
Oh man, man, that's amazing, man. Cheese, I love cheese, man. My oldest son is like, "Is there cheese in that?" Whether it's broccoli, it's like healthy. Everything gotta have cheese, right? It's like okay, you know.
I could eat only cheese. I'd be fine. Nothing but cheese.
All right, gaming.
Like video gaming, right?
Yeah, like video gaming.
I'm so ignorant. I
Hmm.
think it's underrated. I think it's really awesome. And in fact, I think it's so awesome. That's why I don't play, is because I worry if I started playing, I would just
It's
be
gonna
one of
take you
those
away
guys.
from everything else,
Yeah, I would
right?
just be in my diapers in my garage, like, and so I'm like scared. It's like cocaine. Cocaine is also pretty good. That's why I don't mess with it stuff. Right? So I think it's
Right.
underrated, but I don't really want to know.
Uh-huh, uh-huh. No, no, absolutely. I agree, man. My son, he plays games, and I'm like, all right, I think that's pretty cool. But if I started to do what you did, I probably wouldn't get anything else done, man.
You'd go
I would
down the
love to do,
rabbit hole and never come back up.
Roblox, Fortnite, man, all that stuff they do, man. I'm like, it's great. It seems cool, and I'm like, man, I wish I could do it, but I stopped
But
playing
I'm
Madden.
from like the Mario Kart era, and even that
Oh
was like
yeah, that's
even
what I'm
that was
talking
awesome.
about. If we throw Mario Kart, I have to play it, at least once, or
Yeah,
twice.
exactly, dude.
All right, the television.
It's overrated. It's a
Mhm.
pretty cool invention, but like now we got this stuff. It's more
Yeah,
interactive. Just to sit there and like the commercial breaks, I'm done
yeah,
with
yeah,
TV.
yeah. Oh my goodness, man. I like movies now or something like streaming. Where I'm a streaming person, right?
Yeah, exactly. But maybe that's still TV. I don't know where the line is with TV anymore.
Yeah, yeah. Good point. All right, the printer.
Overrated. Like who needs a printer? It's absurd. Like let's chop up trees into little slices and then put like paint on them. Like come on.
Yeah, I agree, man. I was like, I don't know when the last time I used a printer. I'm like, I just, save everything to my computer, my laptop, whatever it is, or my phone, right?
Exactly.
Scan it through my phone, all that crap. Everything just gets sent
You know,
digitally.
plus printers are the one piece of hardware that like never work. Like you plug in your phone and it just works.
Yeah,
Printers, it's always like no new cartridges or like this
yeah,
driver needs to be installed, but you don't know how
yeah,
to like it's just
yeah.
weirdly hard to get printers to work.
And as technical as I am, man, I think the printer is the one thing that makes me feel dumb sometimes. I'm like, this is a pain in the ass, you know. So,
Exactly, exactly.
all right, pizza.
Pizza?
Yeah,
Like eating pizza?
yep,
Oh,
yep.
this is like my cheese answer, man. Of course it's
Oh,
underrated. Like
is that
pizza 3 meals a
okay?
day, no problem. I'm happy for infinity.
All right, Bruce Lee movies, man.
You know, I haven't. I'm kind of embarrassed to say this. I think they're underrated. I think they're great,
Mhm.
but I don't really know. It's kind of like the gaming thing. Like I
Yeah,
think I
yeah,
saw
yeah,
one Bruce Lee movie like 12 years ago. I watched a lot of Jackie Chan movies
yeah,
when I
yeah,
was a
yeah,
kid,
yeah.
so I get like the genre, the martial arts
Yeah.
genre. I know Bruce
I
Lee
like
is like an
that.
amazing human being, like can do
Right,
like beyond magician plus gymnast plus martial artist.
right.
So I think underrated, but I say from a kind of a position of ignorance.
No, no, no. I agree. I think it was at one point I was watching a lot of Bruce Lee movies when I was a little younger, but then not even a lot, right? I saw each one of them probably like, or not even all of them. I don't think I've seen all of them. There's some that comes out every once in a while. I'm like, oh, I never saw that one, But um, I think I've seen the ones I've seen. It was amazing how fast his hands were. I was like moving around with my face, like, oh man, I would get destroyed if I if I ever came across him. But other than that, I don't go deep into it. So I would say it's probably right where it needs to be. For me. If I was to say it.
I didn't realize this was an option. I thought it was overrated, underrated, not or right where it needs to be.
Yeah, yeah,
Right?
yeah, 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 yeah. Definitely right where it needs to be for me. All right, last one, dancing.
Overrated, overrated.
Yeah.
I actually just had to talk with friends about this. Like, I mean, like if people that are cool at dance, like good at it,
Uh-huh.
like I admire that, the athleticism of it, the art of it. But
Hmm.
like, are you talking about like, hey, let's go with friends, have a few drinks, and like go out dancing?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's what
Like
that's the dance I'm talking about. Yeah,
it's overrated, man. You like
yeah,
got to
yeah,
stand there, like look out.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
come on,
yeah.
I'm like
It's
the
tired.
most Caucasian looking guy in the world. Like, in my jeans, I can't even do it if I tried. Like, I just like, I want all the drinking and I want all the socializing, but somehow, like, if we can just
Yeah,
do it sitting
yeah.
still,
You get enough
I'll be
drinking, get
better off.
enough socializing, it'll bring the dance out of you, man. It doesn't matter how
This
great.
thing they say this, just have a few more drinks and you'll dance better. Like there's no sweet spot for me. Like either I'm not drunk enough or I'm so drunk that I'm like sideways. But
Yeah,
there's no
you know.
sweet spot where suddenly I'm a good dancer.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thanks, Joe, man, for
Wait, you didn't answer your own. You didn't answer your own. What about dancing though?
oh yeah, I would say that when the what I call the liquor courage, right? When the liquor is in my
Yeah,
system,
you
man,
have you have the sweet spot.
dancing, right? I have the sweet spot. If it's not there, I'm just looking everybody else do it. It's like one of those things. I want to do it, but the liquor says go do
You
it.
just have to,
And then,
yeah.
I don't care how I look, whatever it is.
Performance enhancing drugs, man.
Yeah, exactly, exactly, exactly. So, but yeah, thanks again, Joe, man. It's
Yeah,
been a
such
pleasure,
pleasure.
man. It's been fun. Audience, thank you for listening to the Data is My Science podcast, show that makes data a passion. I'm your host, Dapper Data. And Joe, where can they reach you at, man, if they want to contact you?
Check out Hyfe.ai. I'm Joe at Hyfe.ai. I'm on Twitter if you look for Joe Brew.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's it.
Anything going on now? Any conferences? Any
Lots going on, but I think for like general audience, what I would love to ask of your listeners is look up Hyfe, Hyfe, iPhone, Android, install it, play around with it, track your coughs during the day, during night. and let us know what you think. Like we're building as we go. You know, we're putting the airplane together as it's going down the runway. So we love feedback, and we especially love the negative feedback because that's what makes us better.
All right. Well, thank you, man. I appreciate it. Hey, audience, man, you can always reach me at Mr. Dapper Data on any one of the social media platforms. I love you all. Thanks again for always tuning in. And peace. Talk to you later.